Miranda Gohh and Rashad V. Chambers. Welcome to Token Theater Friends. I'm very honored and excited to see both of you today. Can we get started by having the two of you tell our viewers and our listeners about this beautiful initiative that you have going on, Theater Producers of Color, what it is, how it started, where it's going, and also, by the way, congratulations on your first week.
Thank you.
Yeah. Miranda, I'll let you
I'm
start.
happy to kick us off. So Rashad and I have yet to meet in person, but we bonded over our shared values and our goals for what we want to accomplish in the industry. Um, this summer, this past summer, we're also part of the industry standard group. We're founding members of that initiative, but we were thinking about questions of how to address the lack of racial diversity on Broadway, specifically within commercial theater, and looking at where does the change actually come from. It became apparent to me that change has to come from the top down, and the person at the top is the producer. So thinking about my own journey within commercial producing, what stuck out to me was how hard it was to even get access to education in commercial producing. The programs that are out there are great, but oftentimes they're exclusive. You need to get a recommendation from someone to get in. They're expensive. So I had thought about, similar to you, Jose, I'd love to, bounce, these thoughts off with you with BIPOC Critics Lab. But my idea was to put together a program that was accessible to all people who identified as BIPOC, to learn how to become commercial producers. And in thinking about that idea, I met Rashad, and he, I was like, what does this program look like? How many weeks will it be? Who will be teaching it? And I knew I needed someone who, had credit on Broadway and who was doing the thing, and who was a natural educator. So I think Rashad and I were on a Zoom, and he mentioned, this is the first time we were on a Zoom together, but he mentioned, oh yeah, like I was speaking about how to become a commercial producer on this lovely panel. And I was like, oh, like that sounds like that could be a good fit. And so I chatted with Rashad, and we kind of hit it off and found that what we were both thinking could be a great match for the both of us. And we started on our way thinking and planning about TPOC, Theater Producers of Color. So Rashad, I'll let you chime in and share your side of the story.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me, Jose. I have to say it's been a great journey working on TPOC with Miranda and the team. It's funny how things happen in the world. I'm one of the few Black Broadway producers. For now, that's going to change very soon. But I had the pleasure of being on the panel for Producing 101 for Black Women in Theater Appreciation Day last summer. And after having that experience, I just had a lot of people reach out to me and say, how appreciative they were of my insight and for my knowledge and guidance. And it started making me think like, okay, maybe I should think about the educational parts of producing. I always try to give back and volunteer for various aspects just because I know representation matters. And I want other people to know that it's possible to have a career in theater. I believe there are a lot of, younger people of color who don't even know you can do something on the business side of theater. They only know about actors, maybe directors. But so that was sort of my thought process. And then maybe a week later, I met Miranda through the industry standard group, and I had mentioned, being a part of the panel and how people had so many questions and how I thought about doing more of that. And then she emailed me and said, "Hey, I'm starting this thing, and I want to talk to you about it." And that's sort of how it all came to fruition. We both had a shared vision of wanting to make the landscape more equitable for people who look like us and be able to give them that access.
I have often asked myself this question, and that's why I want to ask both of you that same question. Knowing in some way that we were entering fields where no one looked like us, where no one, where we probably were not even going to be welcome, why the hell did we go into that? I'm always like, what were you thinking?
For me, I 100% believe representation matters, as I said, but it's also not a deterrent to me to not see myself. In various ways of my life, I've been pretty fearless in just kind of pursuing anything. I guess ignorance is bliss, and I just, kind of just go for things and just try it. And, you know, most of my life, because of my interests, I've been one of few people of color in the room. But I just keep going, and it was really just my interest in creating and loving the idea of taking something from page to stage that made me interested in producing, but I didn't really have any mentors. When I started producing, there were no Black lead producers on Broadway. Now there are a handful, but luckily I had, some white allies that were very generous with their time and, would listen to my questions, would meet with me for breakfast or for coffee and sort of help nurture me. And so we just need more of that. And we need more people of color to have the bandwidth to do it, because even the ones that are there are so few of us that everyone wants, some of our time, and we don't always have it to give because of our own endeavors. But I think, programs like TPOC make it possible to be able to just expand the numbers, the knowledge, and everything.
My reason for getting into it, I don't know if you know this, Jose, but I didn't grow up in the theater world. I was an ice hockey player for 12 years, so I came into the theater game relatively late. But my reason for getting into all of this was just being struck by seeing myself on stage in an authentic way for the first time. Um, you know, Shows like The Wolves by Sarah DeLapp. It's a show about high school soccer players. So of course I resonated with that. Usual Girls by Ming Pfeiffer, her representation of young Asian American women. Um, those shows really struck a chord with me, and kind of opened my eyes to the power of storytelling and representation. So I knew I wasn't going to be on the creative side as myself telling those stories, but I wanted to be a part of the team that would help bring those stories to the wider world. And I think what appeals to me about commercial producing is that the shows that do make it into the commercial sphere are part of this larger cultural conversation, and do have the opportunity to reach thousands of people in a meaningful way. So that's my backstory, and hoping to keep that dream alive, and stay optimistic.
Hockey, I mean, Miranda, like you blow my mind. Like every time I talk to you, you're like, and by the way, I used to do this, and I'm like, oh my God. Um, I'll have to ask. I don't know anything about hockey, but I have questions about hockey. But never mind. Um, so you're both touching on something that's like really interesting to me, and it's the fact that, for instance, like when I started my lab for critics, also, people don't necessarily know. I mean, Rashad, you said like sure, like people can look at actors, right, and directors, and Miranda, you said like creatives, and you mentioned writers, for instance, but there are careers and like jobs, I would say, in theater and in the creative um, industries that people have no idea what we do. For instance, like people don't necessarily know what a critic does. People don't necessarily know what a producer does. So for the people out there who maybe don't know that they can even be producers because they have no idea what that might involve and what that means, can you tell them what it's all about? Like, why do you love producing?
Sure. You want me to start, Miranda?
Yeah, for sure. You're the program mentor.
I look at producing in two ways, and I like to explain it because people often ask me this question. And so, for Broadway, most people start off as a co-producer, and your main responsibility is raising money. And you work under a lead producer. You can have up to four lead producers, and they basically put together a team of co-producers that raise money. And you go out and you you help find investors, and depending on how much you can raise, you may say, "I'll take a $250,000 slot or a $500,000 slot." But your main responsibility is raising money, and then you may be able to go to a marketing or advertising meeting and and learn and be able to be nurtured. But as a lead producer, and this is something that may happen on Broadway, it may happen in a developmental space. I look at the lead producer as sort of like a CEO or a project manager. You're basically responsible for every aspect of the production, whether it's working on the budgets, raising money, hiring personnel, the marketing team, advertising team, director, overseeing the casting process. You're literally putting together every single piece of the production. So when I say from page to stage, you are working on every aspect of bringing that show to life, working closely with the director to understand what does it look like, what's the set, what are the costumes, what are the lighting, and overseeing that entire process with your general manager, working on the budget. How much can we spend here or there? How much marketing do we need? Do we want to advertise on the bus? Do we want a New York Times ad? All of those things. That's all like pre-pro. And then when the show's running, how do we get butts in the seats? What is our plan? Are we going to go on The View? Are we going to, you know, do Broadway and Bryant Park? Like all of those things are part of a producer's job. So there are the creative aspects, and then there are financial aspects of the job.
How do you have time to do anything?
Well, you have a full team around you. You hire people, and you have every department works and does their own job, and you hire people that you like and that you trust, but you do have to oversee it. You do have to be the one that signs off on everything. And it's not easy, but when you have experience and you have the right people working under you, it makes it a lot easier to make it happen.
I wonder if the two of you can talk a little bit about, I mean, like you both love producing and that this is like your life path. But then this year you find yourselves becoming educators. I was very surprised with myself when last year I was like, people were like, you're an educator now. And I'm like, oh my God, what does that even mean? So, how, is this a newfound role for you? And if not, and if you always, consider yourselves educators, how has this like extra, like producer slash educator thing made you feel like what excites you about that? What have you discovered about yourself as educators?
Yeah, I will say I don't know if I technically consider myself an educator. I've kind of been behind the scenes putting the whole thing together, and I'll say we also have a great team that includes Jamie Joyanne Waldorf, Devin Clary, and Penny Pun on the TPOC team. Um, so I myself, I'm a producer in training as well. I'm, always looking to absorb knowledge and advice. And that's kind of one of the reasons why I engaged Rashad in the first place, was, seeking his advice on how to chart a path for myself. So I'm definitely constantly learning, and, trying to figure out what exactly a commercial producer does myself. But I think, aside from the term educator, I have found that I do have a passion for creating opportunities for other people to share in some of the privileges I've had. You know, uh, the training that I've had has come about because of my privilege. And so, in thinking about how we affect change on Broadway, specifically in the commercial theater, I it all starts with the question of why doesn't this exist, right? Like why don't these people have access to this sort of education and mentorship and training? So, we opened applications in December for 2 weeks, not knowing how many we would receive. We got over 300 um, with only 25 slots, right? So it was, the response was unbelievable. And it just goes to show how many people are hungry for this opportunity and to, get started on their own paths to commercial producing. So I'll just say, we had our first class on Monday with the producer Ron Simons as our guest speaker, and it was pretty magical. I'll let Rashad share his thoughts too, but you know, one of the people that I started TPOC with is Osh Ganima from Broadway for All. He is the CEO and founder there, and Broadway for All is our incubator. But we did a commercial producing program together a few years ago. And, he texted me right after we closed the Zoom and he's like, I have goosebumps. Like, that was incredible. But it really makes a difference, uh, reflecting upon it a little afterwards. It was a room, albeit a virtual one, that was administered by BIPOC, taught by BIPOC, and comprised of completely people of color. And that's not something I've ever experienced before. And you could just tell the energy, the questions being asked, why are things this way? What can we be doing to shake things up? That's just something I hadn't experienced before. So it felt really good. I'm sure, yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts too, Jose. But Rashad, I'll let you share what you think as well.
Absolutely. First, I still pinch myself a little bit that I'm the program mentor because I feel like I'm still learning myself. But I guess that's the joy of life, right? We're always learning, and they say every teacher is a student, every student is a teacher. So it's been such a joy to work on this. I don't know if I consider myself an educator, but I always try to give back, and I always try to make myself available for other producers or aspiring producers who were trying to learn. I would volunteer for Theater Resources Unlimited regularly for some of their events because I think that it really takes a village. And I know once upon a time when I first moved to New York and I was a little sponge and was trying to soak everything up. And, there wasn't a CTI, there wasn't a Commercial Theater Institute back then, but the Broadway League had a program called the Producer Development Program. So I would go to different seminars there and just try to learn everything that I could. I wasn't even producing yet. So I guess no, I didn't think of myself as an educator, but now that I'm sort of in this space, I enjoy it, and I enjoy the fact that there are lots of people who are interested in learning and doing this as a career. And as Miranda said, the fact that we received over 300 applications for 25 slots just goes to show that there is a demand. There are other producing programs out there, but there just aren't many out there that are, taught and shepherded by other people of color. And I think that that's truly important. People want to know that it's a safe place and that they can learn from people who look like them. So as this sort of moves forward, Miranda and I have already talked about, how can we make it a regular class? How can we find the funding to do it at least annually? And how can we even do some one-off seminars so the things that we can't cover in 10 weeks, maybe we can do, another seminar here and there just throughout the year to be able to still keep the learning process going. And about Monday, our kickoff was amazing. Everyone came just so enthusiastic to learn and to grow and to share. And they asked such great questions. And I'm just really excited about the next 9 weeks because we've really, not to toot our own horns, we've really put together a dynamic group of speakers, and we have the best of Broadway coming in to share their knowledge with this class.
I think this is actually the moment where we need to toot our own horns. I'm listening to what you're saying, and I mean, Miranda's going to join me next week at a salon at the Kennedy Center precisely about this also. And if we look back at the shitty hell of a year that was 2020 and look at what you created, look at what we created while the world was falling apart. And while things were not going great for anyone, I mean, there's like, we're all still stuck home because of a pandemic, and there's chaos and war. And you were able to create a place of beauty, a place of community. So if you won't toot your own horns, I'll toot all the horns in the world for you.
Well, thank you. Well, I give all the credit to Miranda and her team because they made it happen and they made it happen quickly.
However terrible these past few months have been, I mean, you know, everyone's out of work. The thing that we love to do is unavailable. I think it has been inspiring to see all of these different things that people have put their time and energy into creating. I mean, I can't even count the number of organizations that are just existing to do good and to improve the industry that we're in. So, yeah, I definitely find that encouraging and inspiring for, you know, when we're actually back up and running and seeing what we look like after that.
You mentioned something that I think is like really wonderful, and like I'm smiling, I'm grinning like a fool because I think the same thing every time that I meet with the critics at my lab, and it's that there are no places like that. I mean, like except maybe with like our own families and like when who also we can't even like see these days. But it's so rare, especially like in theater, to be in a room with other people of color and only people of color, where we're creating safe spaces, and regardless of like your spiritual beliefs or not. It's kind of like an equivalent of like a church, without like, I don't know, like again, like not the structure of a church, but it's a place where you know you're safe. It's a place where you know you can be yourself, where you know you can communicate your innermost fears, but also your dreams, your hopes, and all of that. So basically, I'm just saying that I'm so excited for 9 more weeks of that for you. And so far, in terms of the I guess the feedback that you're getting from the industry and the feedback that you're getting also from people who become aware of what you're doing, what's that been like? Like, what has that taught you or told you about the state of theater?
It's been pretty enthusiastic. I mean, even I've had many peers reach out to me, even when the press release went out back in December, just offering their support, asking if they can do anything to help. A lot of people, have wanted to know other producers of color or how to get them involved with their productions and didn't know how, didn't have the resources to meet people. So I think that they're looking for this new wave of producers and people are ready to put them to work.
You know, it has been nice to get the coverage that we were able to receive. For it is a relatively slow news cycle, as I'm sure we're all aware. But the fact that when we launched the industry standard group, like we were the main feature of Broadway briefing that day, and uh, likewise with TPOC to be included in that way and to have that visibility has been really impactful. So yeah, we have people still emailing us to apply for the course or find ways to volunteer their time and support our cause. So it's been great. Yeah.
Knowing what is possible and the worlds that we can build together and the world that we are building together, what are some like absolute like deal breakers where you're like, if you try to come to me with the same nonsense that you were doing before the pandemic and before all this happening, I'm not playing this game anymore. Like, what are your like now that I know and now that I've shown you what can be done, we're not gonna play this game anymore.
That's
I don't know
hard.
if we have time for all of that, Jose.
Yeah, I don't know. I think they're all on a case by case basis, to be honest, because every project is different.
On a personal level, as a person of color, I'm tired of being asked to contribute my own experience as an Asian American woman, the emotional labor that amounts to help someone develop their ideals around equity, diversity, inclusion. It is labor, and I think we should be that should be acknowledged, and we should be compensated for it. So personally, I think we should all recognize that is a facet of our identities that is valuable to people, that um, we shouldn't be handing out for free anymore. So I'm pretty tired of that.
Yeah. That makes sense. I mean, I get it. I understand that completely. I think for me, it's also one thing I will say is that I'm not going to tolerate people who are not willing to do the work. You have to do it on your own. It's not okay anymore to say, oh, I don't know any lighting designers of color. Like, they're out there, find them. If they're not right for your project, that's fine. But there are enough resources and channels where you can dig a little bit deeper and find people to at least interview.
Right.
To at
Like,
least interview. At the end of the day, the director, producer should pick the person who's best to create the vision for the show. But I think we've all seen laziness, and that's not acceptable anymore.
yeah, I think, for me, um, jobs in the commercial producing realm are hard to come by. There aren't a ton, but when you ask folks around the industry why their offices look the way they do, oftentimes the response has been, "We'd love to increase our racial diversity, but we don't know where to find these candidates." And I think that's such a tired response. First of all, some of these jobs aren't even publicized and open to the theatrical community. Folks have traditionally been relying on recommendations from friends, and uh, you know these opportunities have gone to someone because they're the nephew of so and so, right? So I think um, that needs to change as well.
I wonder, like if there's like younger people out there, that, like our listeners and viewers who maybe aren't even in college yet, maybe they're just in high school, maybe they're just home or whatever. What are some things that you identified within yourselves where maybe someone who's really good at, like, I don't know, getting their siblings to I don't know, to go somewhere, or what are some like traits and some qualities within you that you're like, if you're really good at this at home or in school right now, even if you're not dreaming about theater at all, maybe you have what it takes to be a producer.
I think uh, leadership skills. You're steering the ship when you're the producer. So finding ways to see the situation in front of you and uh, create a path for moving forward with the group surrounding you is always good experience. I think if you've ever found yourself being an entrepreneur, whether that's putting together a bake sale for your middle school and raising money for whatever, those are all skills that require organization, vision, passion, and execution. So I think, if you've had any experience doing that, you're well on your way.
Mhm.
And if
So
you're a salesperson, because you have to raise a lot of money. So if you like asking people for money, then then that is a huge part of it.
There's a lot of transferable skills. I mean, I know people who go to school for producing, but very few. Most people are coming in as sort of a second career, or they're just using things that they learned in other areas to do producing. But I will say, in addition to the things Miranda mentioned, communication and empathy. It's so important to be able to articulate your message to everyone so you can stay on the same page, and it trickles down from the top. Your director has to understand what you want, their designers, your marketing people, all of that. And then empathy, it really goes a long way. What we do is so vulnerable, creating, getting performances out of actors, asking writers to do rewrites, you know, having a choreographer restage a number. It all comes down to being able to really um, put yourself in their shoes and be able to understand where they're coming from and why they created that, and be able to sort of get changes or get revisions without killing dreams. So those are two skills that I think are really important, that are not high level. Like anyone can do that. We just have to take a step back. And that's also the process of doing the work, is really making sure that you just know who your audience is, not the people who are seeing the show, but the people you're working for. Not everybody's going to respond to you throwing a chair across the room. Some people may need you to pull them aside and talk one-on-one, and I think that those are two things that are often forgotten about in every aspect of life, not just theater. So I always try to approach things from that standpoint. Sometimes I fail, but that's always my motive, is to start there, and then all the other things come in with being detail oriented and knowing how to read a budget and knowing theater history and all those things. Those things can be learned easily, but those foundation skills, I think, are what's more important, because when you're tired and it's midnight and everything is going wrong, that's when we see your true character.
Amen. And that applies to every profession, to every human being. The way you're describing all of this is making me think that a producer is technically, and I know this isn't a competition, but a producer is technically a show's number one fan, and their job is to recruit other fans and be like, look how freaking incredible this thing is. Come love it with me. I Is that accurate?
I'd say so.
Yeah, I think it starts with passion. To Rashad's point, you need to be in head over heels in love with a project that you're producing, because oftentimes a show's path could last anywhere from 5 to 7 years. So you really have to love the material that you're putting out in the world, as well as the team that's surrounding you. So I think that's a great way to put it, Jose.
So Rashad and Miranda, thank you so much for joining me today. Can you let us know where to find everything about TPOC and everything that you want people to know about? How can they get in touch with you? How can we make any contributions? What can we do to support this beautiful thing that you've created and that you're making happen right now?
Yeah, for TPOC, we have a website, theaterproducersofcolor.org. If you want to stay up to date on what we're doing, we have a newsletter. If you want to make a contribution, we have a donation link there. And if you want to email us, the contact information is there as well.
And we're also on Instagram and Facebook.
Instagram. And now, what is that other one, Rashad?
Oh, Clubhouse.
Clubhouse.
Yeah.
We joined Clubhouse last night.
Wonderful. So everyone go find them there if you can. And once again, thank you so much and keep up the incredible work. May you have 9 more weeks of blessing and blessings and happiness and joy, and we deserve it. And I'll keep tooting your horns. If you won't, then thank you so much for what you're doing.